Welcome back, everybody. This will be the last one. I said that the last one was going to be the last one, but hey, I came back because there was an overwhelming amount of the viewers that wanted me to check out the Prog Archives and their top 100 studio albums. So, what I've done is I've changed the search feature because you can actually search. Kind of like top 100s or whatnot based on years, and I just set that to all. I've set genres to all. I've set now these are only the studio albums because I only wanted the studio albums for this. So the thing that I love about the Prog Archives, for those that don't know, is it's a conglomeration of many people. Like, you can already see, like, Pain of Salvation, Remedy Lane is 1,200 people have voted for that, and it's based on 1 to 5 stars. So a conglomeration, rather than just like one or a few people talking about the album, and I thought that this would be like a really good way of like capping this whole series off. What have all these people kind of thought, and yeah, we're going to see the difference between an amalgamation of users and their ideas of what the best prog albums are, and like one or a few people's opinions. So unfortunately, there's not going to be any like justifications for any of these. It's just, hey, this is what we've got. So the first three that we've got, 100, 99, and 98, great start already. Pain of Salvation, Remedy Lane, absolutely, came out in 2002, was a great kind of reintroduction of Pain of Salvation. Number 99, Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime, absolutely, it kind of kickstarted the whole progressive metal movement in the 80s. It was released back in 1988. Then we're going into Cardiacs, On Land and in the Sea. One of my favorite Cardiacs released. Again, a great 80s album. At the very end of the 80s. Great like avant-garde, rock and opposition. If you're looking for something just completely bonkers, you can't go wrong with On Land and in the Sea from Cardiacs. Now, unfortunately, these next couple of ones I'm not as familiar with. Don't know Annabelle's or Maxophone. But you gotta love my man El Demiello, El Demiella, with Elegant Gypsy. Great jazz rock, fusion jazz stuff on here. I wouldn't necessarily place this in a strictly progressive rock albums, but man, this is like top tier jazz rock fusion. Now we get into IQ's Road of Bones, and I still have a hard time with this album. It's not my favorite IQ album, within the whole neo-prog scene. This isn't my favorite by far. This is Mike Holmes's, like, one of his first like pure albums. I think this was one that like he wrote most of the material on here, rather than it being like a collaboration between him and the boys. And I'm just not a big fan of it. I felt like it was a retread of a lot of the stuff that we got from Dark Matter. And I don't know. I still to this day I'm not a big fan of it. We got some Magma with some Zool. A little bit of a later album from them, back in 2004. I still need to catch up on Zool. I still need to catch up on Magma because I've only heard like 1 or 2 albums of theirs. Definitely acquired taste, I'll tell you that much. Next one I'm not as familiar with, and it being a Canterbury scene, I can understand. I haven't really dove into Canterbury, so I'm not 100% sure about that one. But I at least recognize this next one of El Orm. Some Italian rock. I know that this one really helped define the Italian progressive rock scene. So very well deserved being on here. Miles Davis, Some Bitches Brew. Again, straight up jazz in this one. Love to see this on here. Edge of Sanity. I'm not as familiar with that one. It's a tech extreme metal prog, so that's probably why. But Riverside, good to see Riverside. Second Life Syndrome. I believe this one started the whole, I don't know if it was this one or the one previously, maybe the Rapid Eye movement, that had like this trilogy for Riverside. Great heavy prog on this one. You know, I think Riverside was the kings of this harder expression that wasn't straight up metal. They have recently been touted more as metal, but their last couple of albums haven't really been all that metally. So great to see Riverside on here. Renaissance, Ashes Are Burning, not my favorite from them, but a good addition. You know, I'm much more of a fan of Sherazade, but love to see Ashes Are Burning on here. Some longer stretches here. It's interesting because I remember back in the day when there was actually this subgenre of like folk prog, and they were one of the individuals in there with like mostly Autumn and Jethro Tull, but now they're being classified as symphonic prog, so can't necessarily compare with that. Cardiacs, Sing to God, good to see this one on here. A little bit of a later addition to them, but a big double album. Beautiful album. Again, good to see some more Cardiacs on here. We get the first one in 85 for Caravan, one of the few Canterbury scene albums that I actually recognize and enjoy. A lot more minstrel on here. If I could do it all over again, I'd do it all over you. They're very fun on that double entendre. You know, Girls Who Go Plump in the Night and all that. So yeah, good to see. If I could do it all over again, I'd do it all over you. And at 84, interesting to see the debut album from Emerson, Lake and Palmer on here, their self-titled work. I would have expected to see it a little bit higher up, but coming in at number 83, we have Billy Cobham. I'm not familiar with this one, being a jazz fusion. I might have to check this out. I have seen this album before, but I don't think I've ever actually listened to it. Spectrum. Miles Davis, one of my favorites from Miles Davis, In a Silent Way. Absolutely a must for anybody that loves jazz or this jazz fusion. Yeah, an absolute must. Absolute must. It's my favorite album from him. Coming into Focus with one of their more famous ones, Hamburger Concerto. It's good. It's good. I know that I need to get more into Focus because I think the only one from them that I've heard is the one with Hocus Pocus on it. But yeah, it's still fun. Steve Hackett is on the list at number 80, Voyage of the Acolyte. Good to see this one on here. Absolutely. We're getting into kind of like the mid 70s with this one to show that prog isn't quite dead. And to speak about prog not being dead, we have at number 79, Script for a Jester's Tear with Marillion. Interesting to see that so high up here, you know, for an album that basically kick-started the whole progressive, the neo-progressive movement, the neo-prog. I would have put it higher up, but that's just me. Because, it was this album that essentially said to the 80s, hey, prog isn't dead, let's keep going. So good to see that it's still on here, though. Death is on here. Symbolic, some good metal on there. Arena for... so I'm not as familiar. Aria. Progressive Italiano. Another prog, Italian prog. Yeah, sadly, I'm not as familiar with that. But Anglagard, I am very familiar with. This is their third album, and their last album actually came out 10 years ago, if you can believe it. Holy jeez. Good to see on here. Love Anglagard. And this one is a good album of theirs. You know, it was a really, really good, solid, like, I call it like 90s revival prog, kind of in that sense. Although I'm guessing that their debut album is going to be a little bit higher up. But coming into the first quarter with Gong, I know that I've been told many a times that I need to check out Gong, and unfortunately I haven't yet. Again, Canterbury Scene stuff, Radio Gnome Invisible Volume 3, I know I need to check that out, but yeah. One of my favorite Opeth albums coming in at 74. We're coming into the second quarter. I still love this album. I just recently recorded, and it should be up by now, the Ghost Reservoirs review in my classic albums. Love this album. It's a great start for the band as well, if you haven't already gotten into them. Another Zool album. I don't know this one. The third album from Marillion, Misplaced Childhood. Great to see it at 72. Yeah, great concept, great album. Love it. Okay, so Blackwater Park. Many would say Opeth's best album at 71. Wow, very interesting to see it's here. I wonder if there will be any other albums from Opeth on this list higher up. Another Canterbury Scene. Hatfield and the North. I'm not familiar with those ones. Same with this guy here. 1998. Don't know that one. One from Can. Again, I'm not as familiar with Can, so I can't say. Wow, so we have a very recent one. This was released back in 2020 of Wobblers, Dwellers of the Deep. Yeah, it's fine. It's a fine album. I'm not as big of a fan of Wobbler as a lot of people are. Some great retro prog in that sense. We have our first installation at number 66 for Porcupine Tree in Absentia. Yeah, I can't say anything about that. I think that's a great addition. Not my favorite, but I know a lot of people love this album. So, yeah. Coming into another Magma album. Again, I'm not as familiar with Magma, but I do appreciate that they're here. Some good Zool. And I'm not as familiar with this one either. Yeah, interesting. Okay. But I am very familiar with this next one. Romantic Warrior from Return to Forever. Absolutely love this. Yeah, it's got everything. El Damiela is on here. Chick Corea is on here. You got Stanley Clark on here. And, oh shoot, I can never remember the drummer's name, which I am so sorry. But yeah, absolutely great jazz fusion. Just absolutely great. We've got our first induction from Rush at 60, Permanent Waves, starting the 80s off very, very well. Another, Mahavishnu's Orchestra. Love to see them on here. They are so good. They're basically what would happen if like King Crimson from the Lark's Tongue and Aspect and Starless and Bible Black, that era, just went straight up jazz. Like, it's just so good. So very good. Love these guys. Glad to see them on here. Robert Wyatt, I don't know, but another Canterbury Scene. All Traps on Earth. Interesting to see these guys on here. Another recent induction on here. Good to see some like more recent stuff. I've kind of seen a lot of these lists and they keep pretty heavily to the 70s. So I'm very, very glad to see some more more recent stuff on here. And, All Traps on Earth is basically, if we're getting right down to it, an Anglagard continuation album. And it's fine. I think it's really good. Gentle Giant, their second album, their first induction on here. Acquiring the Taste. I still come back to this album. This is one of those albums from me that's like a, what's the term? Kind of like a comfort album, like comfort food. I come back to this whenever I need a good lift me up. I love this album. This is when they were really starting to find themselves. So yeah, great induction. So there is another Opeth album, The Still Life. Interesting to see that Still Life made it above Blackwater Park. But I actually listened to Still Life more than Blackwater Park. But that being said, I like the album overall of Blackwater Park. There's a few tracks from Still Life that I think are better, like the first track and Face of Melinda. In my opinion, is better than anything on Blackwater Park, but Blackwater Park from start to finish is a better album, in my opinion. That's my own humble opinion. So, yeah. Okay, Fear of a Blank Planet from Porcupine Tree. So good to see that this is on here. This is my favorite Porcupine Tree album. It'll be interesting to see if we have any more additions for Porcupine Tree. I can really only think, like, if I'm going to do a prediction, I can only think that maybe The Sky Moves Sideways is more, like, would be higher on the list. But, yeah, Fear of a Blank Planet is still my favorite Porcupine Tree album, and it's so good to see that it's on the list here. And Genesis Trick of the Tail, it showed the world that Genesis could continue on without Peter, and how right they were. Love this album. This is my second favorite Genesis album. All right, Steve Wilson with Hand Cannot Erase. Yeah, I can understand it being there. Yeah. Banco, another Italian prog. They actually just released an album that I'm hoping to review soon. So hopefully by the time this has gone out, that will have actually gone out. So yeah, hopefully you'll see my opinion on Orlando, the latest. I always want to say it Blanco, but it's Banco. Yeah, good to see that their album's on here. Great stuff. Frank Zappa, Mothers of Invention. It's interesting, so many people point to this one as being their best. I always love Hot Rats and Apostrophe in terms of like the encompassing of what Frank Zappa is. Nothing against One Size Fits All. Still love this album. But yeah, Michael Field Omadon. Absolutely. Love this album. One of my favorite Michael Oldfield projects. We got Peter Hamill with In the Silent Corner. The Silent Corner and The Empty Stage. Love this album. If you want like Vandergraaf Generator without being a Vandergraaf Generator album, this is love this album. Gentle Giant's Freehand, it's fine. I still think that the second half of this album is a little bit of a dud, but still love this album. Love it. My favorite Steve Wilson project, I think, ever, The Raven That Refused to Sing and Other Stories. Yeah, this album just blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. Love this album. And one of my favorite Vandergraaf Generator. We were just talking about them. Good to see you here. Still Life. Love this album. Love this album. This is a great, very like eclectic prog album. Love it. Yeah. Okay, so we got the Grand Wazoo from Frank Zappa. This is one that you don't see very often. Glad to see this one so high. It's great. It's fun. Supertramp, yeah, Crime of the Century, my favorite Supertramp album. Love this one. You're going to hear that a lot. Yeah, now that we're, into the top 50, because all these albums deserve some love. That's great to see this one here. Snow Goose from Camel. Good to see this one on here as well. I think this is the first induction from Camel that we've seen. Yeah, I love that it's purely instrumental. It's, very brave. Metal from Pink Floyd. Absolutely. Don't need to say too much about that one. And I'm not familiar with this one. Okay, another Italian. I really need to get into Italian prog. Maybe I'll ask my buddy Scott from the Prog Corner. Give me a hand because he knows a lot more about Italian prog than I do. So yeah, Gentle Giant, Power and the Glory. Not my favorite from them. It's just a little too sharp for me. A little too sharp. Okay, two back-to-back Dream Theater. We've got Images and Words and Metropolis Part 2. Yeah, both of those really deserve to be on there. Those are definitely two that really capture where they were in the band, So you got Images and Words at the very beginning. Well, not the very beginning, but like very soon in their whole thing. And then the album that kind of changed it all for them when they broke free from the studio, the record labels, and went out on their own. And this was the make or break album of Metropolis Part 2. And oh boy, they definitely did it, My favorite Renaissance album, Scheherazade and Other Stories. Love this one. And an album that we saw a lot on the other albums, The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Great addition to the Genesis lineup. I still listen to this day, and I find more and more that I love about it. Probably one of the most famous Canterbury Scenes album from Caravan in Land of Grey and Pink. Yeah, this is one of the few Canterbury Scene albums that I've actually really dove into and digested. So good to see that one on here. One of my favorite Gentle Giant albums of Octopus at 35. Yeah, can't go wrong with that one. Okay, the Yes album. I can see that. 71. Absolutely. This is kind of like in my opinion, we're almost at the Yes in their ultimate form. All that we're missing is Rick Wakeman. Nothing against Tony Keys. Love Tony. But yeah, there's something about Rick Wakeman that just kind of put the band into that stratosphere. Okay, Vandergraaf, H to He, Who Am the Only One, a very early addition to the progressive rock landscape. Yeah, love them. And probably the most famous Mahavishnu Orchestra with Birds of Fire. If you're going to start anywhere with Mahavishnu, start here. This is an absolute must. It's so good. So very good. Okay, a more recent one. This was actually the first album from Wobbler that I heard, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The first track was very, very well done. Very good retro prog. Kind of retro prog in its best form. From Silence to Somewhere. Love this album. It's a great album. Farewell to Kings from Rush, one of my absolute favorites from Rush. Only outdone by the predecessing album, the album that would follow this one up. And I'll see if it's still on here at number 30, the Farewell to Kings. Yeah, this really shows that these Canadian boys can play. And they can play ball with some of the high hitters of the prog scene. At number 29, another Italian prog that I'm not... Oh, PFM. Okay, so I know PFM. I'm just not familiar with this album, so can't really say too much about that. Kind of Blue from Miles Davis. I think this is probably his most famous, outside of Witch's Brew, albums. And how can you not? My favorite harmonium album. I can never pronounce the French, but it's like basically the 5 Seasons. And it's just so good. If you haven't heard this album, please do. French Canadians, so great stuff. You know, you got a lot of that kind of Acadian flavor to their presentation of progressive rock. But oh man, it is just mwah, cream of the crop. It's so good. And we were talking about Hot Rats, and here they are. My favorite Frank Zappa project. I listen to this all the time, and I still get that good feeling. You know, In a Glass House from Gentle Giant, one that gets overlooked quite regularly. But I'm so glad to see that In a Glass House is on here at 25. So we're coming into the top 25 now. After this, we got Hybris, my favorite Anglard album. This one really changed things for me. You know, like this was one of the few progressive rock albums that I was listening to it and I'm like, I cannot really believe that what I'm hearing is what's going on. Like I could not believe what I was listening to. So absolutely great album. If you haven't heard this one by now, please go and find it. It's harder to find because I don't think they have it on most streaming services, but if you dig your feet in, you can find it, and it's well worth it. And we come to Banco's probably their most famous album. I've listened to it once or twice, and it's good. It's good. Yeah, good to see it at number 23. We got at number 22, Jethro Tull. I think this is the first Jethro Tull album that we've seen. Aqualung. This was the one that like people started to say, oh, is Jethro Tull really like a prog band? And then they would follow it up with... we'll talk about it once we find it, because I have a feeling we'll be seeing it a little bit later on. And we have my favorite Rush album with Hemispheres. Good to see that Rush's Hemispheres is on here. So I will wonder if we will see Moving Pictures, because I can see that one would be a higher up album. Another Banco at number 20. Good to see them on here as well. Yeah, there's Moving Pictures, just as I thought. And Yes is Relayer. Very good to see Rush on here. As well as Yes, Rush and Yes. We're getting into Moon Madness from Camel. It always goes back and forth of which one I like more between Moon Madness and the Snow Goose. But man, I love the individual tracks on Moon Madness. Whereas in the Snow Goose, I love the overall experience. So yeah, love this one. PFM, I think it's their most recognizable album. Per un Amico. I still really need to get into this one, as I think I maybe gave it 1 or 2 spins. Yeah, it's very apparent to me, the gap of knowledge that I have for the Italian prog. I really need to get into that. We've got Camel's Mirage at number 15. Number 14, Lark's Tongue and Aspic. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I'm not as big of a fan of Lark's Tongue and Aspic from King Crimson. It's fine, but it's not my favorite. You know, I know a lot of people put it up there as like one of their favorites, but I don't know. I'm not a big fan. But I am a huge fan of Nursery Crimes. The Genesis album that introduced both Steve Hackett as well as Phil Collins. So love to see that one on here. Pawn Hearts from Vandergraaf Generator. Absolutely. Yeah, 71. My favorite album from Vandergraaf. Good to see that on here. Yes is Fragile. Yep, this is the penultimate, the absolute ultimate lineup from Yes. So good to see that on here. Vandergraaf Generator in the top 10 with God Bluff. And I love God Bluff. Just not as much as Pawn Hearts. I love God Bluff. Love God Bluff. Arrow, Scorched Earth, and Sleepwalkers. You don't get better than that. But yeah, there's just something special about Paw and Hearts. Okay, we're getting into the top 10. As I mentioned, Animals from Pink Floyd. Arguably my favorite Pink Floyd album. Well, no, everybody knows that Heart Mother is my favorite. But I always kind of go back and forth of what's my second favorite, whether it's Wish You Were Here and Animals. Depends on the day. It really depends on the day. We got Red for King Crimson at number 8. Yep. Absolutely. Makes sense. Foxtrot from Genesis. Yeah, we're coming back. Okay. Dark Side of the Moon is still really, really high, and I was so surprised. I'm still surprised. I at least understand it being at number 6, but like for me, Dark Side of the Moon is a 15 in a top 100. I would have put Animals higher than Dark Side of the Moon, but I do understand the appeal, the radio play, and just the overall prestige. It really did bring progressive rock much more into the mainstream. So, and there's Thick as a Brick. Yeah, we got Thick as a Brick at number 5. Now here's, I don't know. My opinion, it'll be interesting to see what we've got, because now we're into the top 5. Thick as a Brick from Jethro Tull, which was originally written almost as a parody of progressive rock, being like, well, if you think we're going to be prog, well, let's do this. Yeah, so that's fun. In the Court of the Crimson King, the album that arguably started the whole movement, at number 4. So we're going to see what we've got for 3, 2, and 1. Let's see. Wish You Were Here from Pink Floyd at number 3. That's respectable. I can understand that. Yeah, I can understand that. We got my favorite album of all time at number 2, Genesis Selling England by the Pound, which means Close to the Edge at number 1. For the most part, I 100% agree with this list. The only thing that I think, like the glaring sore thumb, IQ's Road of Bones is the wrong IQ album to have on here. I would have either put Ever or maybe even Subterranea on here. My favorite from them is still Dark Matters, but Frequency is also really good. In terms of like showcasing the whole IQ mythos on there. A little disappointed to see that was there. This top 5 though, I agree that, yeah, Close to the Edge, number 1, no complaints there. Number 2, Selling England by the Pound, no complaints there. Wish You Were Here, no complaints there. It's just in the Court of the Crimson King, I would have put it higher up. But it's so hard, it's so hard. Thick as a Brick at number 5. So like these five albums, any one of them could be number 1, and I couldn't say anything about. But yeah, absolutely respectable list. I think out of all the lists that I've seen so far, this one is the one that I agree the most with. This is the one that I agree the most with. Now, granted, this is also the top 100, so there's like double the amount of albums that are on here that we could cover the territory with. But even within the top 50, lots of good variations, lots of good covers of all the different subgenres of prog. We had a lot of Soul, had a lot of Italian. We had a couple from the folk, heavy rock, extreme prog, jazz prog on here. So like a really great summarization of progressive rock as an overall genre of music. Very serviceable. So really appreciate that. So yeah, that's about it. I said the last video was going to be the last one, but I saw, because I recorded them all in one go. That spoiler alert. But I saw a lot of people saying, well, what do you think about Rate Your Music? And I don't like the interface for Rate Your Music. But I saw a lot of other people saying, hey, what about the Prog Archives? And yeah, I can't. Once I heard that, I'm like, I have to do that. How can I not? So this was my credentials. The year filter for all, the progressive subgenre of all, the studio, and yeah, the country was all. And then I just hit run. And there you go. So there you go. How do you guys think about this? Do you agree with it? Do you not agree? Let me know all about your thoughts about these. I'm going to leave the top 3 on there. Yeah, let me know about your thoughts about this. If you love these albums, if you hate these albums, and perhaps now that this is the end, what is your own ranking? Maybe keep it to the top 10. What's your top 10 progressive rock albums of all time? Let me know all about that by commenting down below. And that's all I've got for you guys today. This whole review is getting a little long, so I'm going to cap it off by saying thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.